Hi everyone, welcome to the March 2022 Farsight Intelligence Briefing, and today is a really big one. This is such an important intelligence briefing because I'm going to be trying to clear up something that's been really confusing out there in the whole world of information, especially the New Age community, on creating your own reality. And it's been confusing on purpose, meaning there have been people that have wanted you not to understand things about creating your own reality. So I'm going to be talking to what we've learned, especially with respect to the remote viewing phenomenon, with all the studies that we've been doing here at Farsight. And I'm going to be talking to you today about what it actually requires to create your own reality. Now, I know that a lot of people sometimes say that our Farsight projects sometimes have a bit of a negative tint to it because we're finding out what the reptilians are doing or what this is doing or what that's doing. It's not the way, folks. The reality is we're trying to guide the entire planet to a positive future. Now, that is the reality we are trying to create. So some people who are saying, yeah, but you're always bringing up these negative things. How can you create the positive reality? That's because you've been duped. You create the positive reality not by ignoring the negative things. You create the positive reality by seeing everything clearly. There's been a whole bunch of disinformation that has come out, especially, and I must say, especially within the channeling community, that has focused on not having negative thoughts. So you just blind yourself to everything that's going on. And that is honestly an attempt to try to keep you within a prison system. Now, please, just let me explain. Let me explain it for you. Now, we're going to have this intelligence briefing in two parts. The first part is going to be a brief introduction of the basic ideas that you need to understand about creating your own reality. And then the second part is going to talk about the physics of creating your own reality. You see, manipulative ETs could never prevent humanity from recognizing that you do create your own reality. So they had to acknowledge that, but on the same side, they didn't want people to take it to a point where they saw what everything was going on and created a really positive reality. So the reality is you have to understand the physics of what they're talking about, they're alluding to. And I'm going to describe that in the second part in a way that's very accessible to absolutely everyone. You'll understand why, on the level of physics, you do create your own reality. But let's get to some basic introductory parts first. The idea that you create your own reality is an idea that has been really brought up by a lot of beings who are channeled. Now, at the end of this presentation, I'm going to be talking about a very nice bit of channeled information coming through by, say, the Abraham entity by Esther Hicks. But I'm going to get to that at the very end. But basically, that entity basically talks about the stuff the way you need to talk about it. But first, let's get to everything else. When people talk about creating your own reality, in most cases, and in almost all channeled cases, with extraterrestrials coming in and talking about it, they never fully explain it, and they never fully explain it for a reason. It's always a situation where they're saying, you create your own reality, so you have to have the good vibrations of the reality, and you need to think positive and all that stuff. And then when someone asks them about something else, they almost push those person down, like, why are you doing this? You shouldn't be doing that. You should be creating your own reality. You should be thinking the positive thoughts. Just disengage from all that negative stuff. They're doing that for a reason. You see, creating your own reality is true. On the level of physics, it actually is true. And you can create your own very positive reality. You can do that, but you have to understand what's involved in doing that. It's not simple. It's not just push away negative thoughts. It's not simple. And it's often misrepresented in order to control very naive populations. Okay. Now, the manipulative ETs often through channeled information, that you create your own reality by having these positive vibrations because they don't want people to ask the hard questions. It's a form of psychological warfare, honestly, that ETs have mastered over millions of years in order to control populations. Because eventually populations figure out that you do control your own reality. So if they're going to figure that out, they want to the manipulative ETs want you to make that reality the way they want it to be, not the way you might want it to be. The idea is pushed that people should only focus on the positive thoughts or vibrations. And this actually spreads the fear that people could create their own bad reality by thinking about it. Now just think about that, what that means. That means that whenever something happens that's bad, then the person will say, oh, well, I must have created that. I was responsible for that. I created that bad reality. I brought this on myself. And so they end up blaming themselves for having bad thoughts. They blame themselves for doing it bad and having the bad reality, and they think they must double down and have better thoughts. That's part of the prison system. You see, it constantly, continually reinforces the prison concept within human thinking. People think that they caused all the bad stuff and thus they deserve to be in the prison or whatever situation they find themselves in. They ultimately say they should be here because they brought it on themselves. That's what the ETs want, the bad ETs, not the good ETs. There's good ones, but the bad ones, that's what they want you to believe. They want you to believe that you deserve everything that you get because you just brought it on yourself with the bad thoughts. Now listen, folks, honestly, please hear this. You were not given a brain just to not use it. There is absolutely nothing preventing people from seeing the truth when they're creating their own reality. There is no reason at all for you to not see half of reality when you're creating your own reality. You don't have to have blinders on like a horse that can't see to the side because they have these blinders on. You don't have to have blinders on in order to create your own reality. To create a reality that does not require, to create your own reality does not require people to not see reality. Nothing in all the universe requires you to not think clearly, to not see clearly. Nothing in the universe does that. Now, ignorance does not yield freedom. It yields slavery. Now let's think about these extraterrestrials who you've heard channeled many times, and they talk about this, don't get involved into the negative thought. Always envision your own positive thought. Just disengage from the negative stuff. Just think about that. Obviously, the extraterrestrials know the negative stuff. They acknowledge it even when they're questioned. When someone says, well, what about this? What about the reptilians? They acknowledge that they know the whole stuff, and they say, but you shouldn't be doing that. They almost battle you down, chase you down, and say, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be focusing on the positive. But they obviously know the negative, and it's not hurting them. Did everyone hear what I just said? The extraterrestrials that are saying focus on only the positive, they obviously know the negative, and it's not hurting them. Do you get it? If it's not hurting them, why should it hurt you to know the same stuff? Do you see the logic here? If it's not hurting them to know the negative stuff, why are they not telling you the negative stuff? It's obviously not going to hurt you to know the truth either. So creating a reality requires that people see what they don't want in order to know what they do want. Do you understand? You have to know what you don't want in order to know what you do want. That's how to navigate existence. If you're trying to figure out what you should do, you have to know what you don't want in order to know what you do want. If you blind out negative stuff, you don't know what you don't want. Oh, I don't want to think about that. I'm focusing just on the positive stuff, the good vibrations. Then you don't know what you don't want, and that means it's impossible for you to navigate to what you do want. So seeing the bad side of things is absolutely necessary to creating a better reality. So you want to create a good, positive reality. If you don't look and see the total reality that's there, the negative as well as the positive, it's impossible for you to get the positive reality. That's what the negative ETs want you to avoid. They want you to avoid creating a positive reality that you like. Now, you are always going to create your own reality. The question is, are you going to create the reality that you want, or the reality that they want. You're going to create it no matter what. Are you going to create the reality that you want or the reality that they want? So unless you know the negative, you can't really understand the positive, and you can't create the positive since you don't know what you don't want. So you have to know what you don't want in order to make a choice. Now, this balance of having to know both sides is a little bit Star Wars-ish. You have the Jedi and you have the Sith. Now, the Jedi sacrifice themselves in order to help the universe, the galaxy, whatever. The Sith satisfy themselves. They don't sacrifice themselves. They believe in themselves and just doing their own stuff. So they believe in a selfish orientation. So what you have is the Sith willing to do all types of bad things in order to satisfy their selfish interests, and the Jedi willing to sacrifice themselves in order for the betterment of the galaxy, but they don't even know their own selfish interests. They don't know themselves. So they don't have a vision for what they think should be, because they're essentially mercenary force that's hired by the good guys, the Republic, and then the Sith are the selfish guys that are going in and battling it away. But nobody has balance. The whole point is, in order for you to create what you want, you have to have balance. You have to have the Sith as well as the Jedi both together within yourself. You have to be able to know what you want and know what you don't want. You have the good side and the bad side. This is what we call contrast. And the contrast, knowing the good as well as the bad, is absolutely necessary. It cannot be avoided. You can not only get the bright and not the dark. You have to have the contrast in order to create the reality that you want. Remember, you're always going to create a reality. The question is it a reality that you want or a reality that somebody else wants for you to have? Okay? Now, the channeled entities who say that say that you should simply not give any credence to the negative stuff are actually trying to control their audience to voluntarily stay within the prison system. Only knowing everything, positive and negative, gives someone the ability to navigate out of the negative situation and towards the positive situation that they themselves want. Pushing away the negative fears, now get this, pushing away the negative fears and thoughts does nothing. Pushing away the negative fears and thoughts does nothing to eliminate those things from a person's timeline. You can't push those thoughts away and thus eliminate those things from your timeline. In fact, what it does is you're giving all that energy to the negative stuff that you're pushing away, and it actually helps manifest those things within your timeline. So if the negative ETs are saying don't give any credence to the idea of reptilians and them doing bad things or whatever, just focus on the positive, you're actually helping to manifest all the negative stuff with the reptilians and everything else in your timeline. You're giving energy by pushing it away. Whatever you focus on in any way, even in a negative way, by pushing things away, you're giving focus to it. And so what you're doing is you're bringing that in. So you cannot look at it from the perspective of psychology. You cannot psychologically bury a bad thought and make it go away. Psychologists have known this for a very long time. Just think about it. You have a bad thought, something bad happened, a trauma happened in your life, bad experience, you try to bury it. What happens? That's the basis of psychosis. That's why people go to therapists. That's why people end up in mental hospitals. Bringing up all the bad stuff and then releasing it clearly is the only way to liberate yourself from those bad things. That's why people go and talk to a therapist. The therapist eventually helps navigate them through the medicine of talking to talk about all the bad things that happen until they're no longer deeply repressed, but they're finally out, and only then is the person free from those thoughts. So burying the thoughts, pushing them out, just doesn't work. Now listen, let's go political. There's wars going on right now. The big war in Ukraine with Russia invading Ukraine. Let's talk about dictators. All right, let's talk about dictators. This applies not just to individual psychology, but to what dictators do. Dictators try to control their populations. They try to control people by controlling what they think. That's an old story, an old tactic. They try to stop people from seeing the negative side of things. Now, Does that ever make the negative stuff go away? Answer that question. Having dictators tell the populations they can't think certain thoughts, does that ever make the negative stuff go away? What kind of reality is being created? It's the reality that the dictator wants. Now, at this very current time, just so happens that it is illegal in Russia to discuss the war in Ukraine and to call it a war. So if you actually call it a war, you can actually go to prison. So it's illegal to talk about the war at all as a war, or even to call it a war. So the authorities do not want people to even think about the war as a war. They want people to think that it's a liberation exercise. So they put out some other information about it. Okay? Does this make the war any less terrible? If they tell people it's not a war, does that make it go away? Does it make it not a war? If they try to use propaganda to convince everybody it's not what it is, does that make the reality any different? So changing the thoughts to try to be positive when in fact something negative is going on does nothing at all to create a positive reality. It doesn't change the war. It doesn't. The war is the same, and forcing people to think that it is different from what it really is, it only helps the controllers continue the war and to do worse things. So propaganda is fully designed to enable the controllers to do worse things and to continue what they're doing. And this is the essence of authoritarian and totalitarian propaganda. That's what it is. That's what authoritarian and totalitarian propaganda is designed to do. Let's go full scale. Let's consider the job of Joseph Goebbels during the Nazi years in Germany. Now, Joseph Goebbels, he was the Reich Minister of Propaganda from 1933 to 1945 at the end of the war. And he guided his ministry to have control, total control over all media, arts, and information in Germany. He painted a rosy picture for what he was doing. Controlling what people know and think became his full-time job. By forcing people to not think certain things, making it illegal to think or talk about certain things, pushing all those things away. Now, only people who want to control you will tell you not to give credence to that which is negative. Now, the Nazis kept the reality of their concentration camps from a very large section of the German populace. Did that make the concentration camps go away? No, of course not. Did it make the German population eliminate the horrors of the concentration camps? No, of course not. What about the gas chambers? What about the ovens? Everything. Did it make the 11 million people who were killed go away? No, it didn't do any of that. Propaganda designed to create a way of thinking for people does nothing to stop the bad stuff from happening. The only thing it does is to enable those who are trying to control you to continue doing what they're doing. They want to continue getting away with it. So seeing the negative does not bind you. Seeing the negative stuff does not bind you. If you're a Jedi, you can't ignore the Sith, or you're going to eventually run into them and have a battle and end up dying. If you're a Sith, you can't ignore the Jedi. You're eventually going to run into them and have a battle and dying. You have to see both sides. Seeing the negative doesn't bind you. It doesn't prevent you from doing something positive. It sets you free from the control of the negative, and it sets you free from those people who are trying to control you. And then you then have the power to create a reality that you want. And that's the key. It's not power to control. It's not power to create your own reality. You're going to create your own reality no matter what. And I'm going to explain how that works with regard to physics in just a few moments. The real question is it going to be a reality that you want or that somebody else wants you to have? You see, manipulative people, ETs and others, they have figured out how to control what you think, how to control what kind of reality you're going to create. Because they want a slave force, they want a slave population, and they have to control the way that slave population thinks because that's going to create the reality of that slave population. Don't you remember the African Americans when they were slaves back in the old slavery days in the United States? They were absolutely forbidden to learn how to read. The slavers didn't want them to know anything, because knowing things could set them free. Then they would have seen the reality of their situation, and that the slavers were no different than the African Americans that were enslaved. The only people who do not want you to see the negative are those people who are aligned with those who are doing the negative. And they want you to continue getting away with it. Now, you may have your favorite channel that you go to, your favorite channel entity that you want to go to and you go to see. As soon as you hear them say, don't give any credence to the negative side, the vibrations, don't think about the reptilians, focus on what you do want, that's the evidence that they're working for the reptilians, that they're working with the reptilians, that they're working with the oppressors, because there's nothing to stop them from knowing about it. So there should be nothing to stop you from knowing about it. Knowing about it isn't going to hurt you. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do the following translation. Whenever you hear something like this, do not give credence to the negative vibrations that you do not want to manifest in your life. Translate that. What it means is, do not think about what it means is, do not think about what I and my colleagues are doing so that we can continue doing it. That's the translation. So, do not give credence to the negative vibrations that you do not want to manifest in your life really means, do not think about what I and my colleagues are doing so that we can continue doing it. That's what it means. Now, if you choose to ignore the negative that surrounds you, then you will be a slave to those who do those negative things. And to be honest, it's what you deserve. If you believe you deserve better, and I believe you deserve better, then open your eyes to everything that is going on. See it clearly. It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to bite you to know the negative. Then you will see reality, and you will be able to navigate to a reality that you really, honestly, truly prefer. People control you by limiting what you know, or by convincing you not to think about what they are doing. Now, we're going to get into the deep stuff now, the really deep stuff, the physics that explains why it works. This is the details, and this is what you need to know. This will give you the power over any ETs, over anybody that tries to control you.